I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
The train dinner scene in Casino Royale is one of the very, very best James Bond scenes that's ever been written, and that's because the writers use a very specific screenwriting technique, which we're going to learn today. So stick around to the end of this video for 4 tips on how you can learn how to write scenes like this one. First, we need to discuss the screenwriting technique known as subtext. Subtext is when dialogue has multiple layers of meaning. Characters could be saying one thing and meaning something completely different, or they could be trying to say 2 equally important things at the same time. It's a powerful tool characters use to try and achieve their goals or get what they want. And from an audience perspective, it helps us viewers become active participants within a scene by making us trying to figure out exactly what's going on. Basically, it's the filmmakers giving the audience the equation of 2 + 2 instead of simply spoon feeding us the number 4. And as long as this is done with care and intention, making the audience work a bit to get some of the richness of a scene makes for a much more memorable and enjoyable viewing experience. Let's take a look at Casino Royale to see exactly how this is done.
I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
Okay, so the writers brilliantly start this scene with a rare line that has triple meaning. Adding too much subtext can make a scene convoluted, but in this case it works. Bond is effectively saying these 2 things. 1, he's acknowledging Vesper's comment that she's in charge of the buy-in money for the poker game. 2, he's saying she's attractive. 2 meanings for the price of 1 line, a line that has only 4 words in it, I might add. That's a lot to pack into such a small, tiny sentence. But Ryan, didn't you just say that this line had 3 meanings? Why, yes. Yes, I did. The last meaning is for fans of the Bond franchise specifically. Vesper saying she's the money, with Bond immediately responding with a sentence containing the word penny, is a callback to the famous Bond character of Moneypenny. Now, the average viewer won't get it, and we don't even get introduced to this character until film 3, Skyfall, but it's a wink wink to Bond fans done in a way that doesn't disrupt the flow of the scene in the slightest. 2 characters, 2 lines, 8 words, 3 meanings. That's some good writing. No, that's some great writing.
The Treasury has agreed to stake you in the game.
Vesper. I do hope you gave your parents hell for that.
Thank you. Your boss must be well connected. I've never seen so much go out the door so quickly.
Not quite so stylishly.
Vesper ignores this quip and immediately moves to business. But Bond would rather focus on Vesper, and we have another subtextual line. I've never seen so much go out the door so quickly, and then Bond retorts, or so stylishly. On the surface, the money is being discussed, but Bond, again, is speaking about Vesper. Soon enough, Vesper will turn the tables on Bond with similar subtextual quips, but first we need to get some plot details out of the way. While this scene is about the characters for sure, nearly every scene in a film should move the plot along as well, and we take just a few seconds to hear this piece of information that will be vital to the plot later on.
10 million was wired to your account in Montenegro, with a contingency for 5 more if I deem it a prudent investment. I suppose you've given some thought to the notion that if you lose, our government will have directly financed terrorism. What looks good?
We have a quick train transition to show a brief passage of time, which lets us pick up the conversation a bit further in, avoiding the small talk, but acknowledging that, realistically, it occurred.
So you're telling me it's a matter of probability and odds? I was worried there was some chance involved.
Well, any of you assume the player with the best hand wins.
So that will be what you call bluffing.
You've heard the term. Then you'll also know that in poker you never play your hand. You play the man across from you.
And you're good at reading people.
Yes, I am. Which is why I've been able to detect an undercurrent of sarcasm in your voice.
I'm now assured our money is in good hands.
You don't think this is a very good plan, do you?
So there is a plan. I got the impression we were risking millions of dollars and hundreds of lives on a game of luck. What else can you surmise, Mr. Bond?
About you, Miss Lind?
Bond subtly suggests to Vesper that there is more to this conversation than just money and poker, which she instantly picks up and runs with. This is an example of subtext that leads to an actual change in the primary conversation that is happening at the surface. Bond and Vesper effectively agree to discuss one another without, of course, actually agreeing to.
What else can you surmise, Mr. Bond?
About you, Miss Lind? Well, your beauty's a problem. You worry you won't be taken seriously.
Which one can say of any attractive woman with half a brain.
True, but this one overcompensates by wearing slightly masculine clothing, being more aggressive than her female colleagues, which gives her a somewhat prickly demeanor. And ironically enough, makes it less likely for her to be accepted and promoted by her male superiors, who mistake her insecurities for arrogance. Now, I'd have normally gone with only child, but, you see, by the way you ignored the quip about your parents, I'm gonna have to go with orphan.
Now, before you say, wait a minute, there's no subtext here, the writers have actually done something quite clever. Notice that Bond never says you about Vesper. He doesn't say, you have a prickly demeanor, you won't be accepted and promoted by your male superiors, your insecurities make you arrogant. He doesn't say any of that exactly like that. Instead, Bond refers to Vesper in the third person for this entire line. This one overcompensates, which gives her, who mistakes her. So, what does this accomplish? It ultimately makes the line more nuanced by allowing Bond to effectively critique Vesper without going into full force criticism. It's subtle, but allows Vesper to dish it right back at Bond with similar third-person critiques.
All right. By the cut of your suit, you went to Oxford or wherever. Naturally think human beings dress like that. But you wear it with such disdain. My guess is you didn't come from money, and your school friends never let you forget it. Which means you were at that school by the grace of someone else's charity, hence the chip on your shoulder. And since your first thought about me ran to orphan, that's what I'd say you are.
And then Vesper hits a nerve which won't fully pay off until 2 films later.
Well, you are. I like this poker thing.
Not only does Vesper dish it back to Bond, she brings it full circle back to poker, which Bond was smugly leading with only a moment before. Of course, she doesn't really care an ounce about poker, which is where the subtext comes in. Their previous discussion about poker and bluffing and reading people was effectively just used for her to brilliantly take control of the conversation. She's effectively brought the whole thing back on Bond's head with just a simple line, but she doesn't stop there.
And that makes perfect sense. Since MI6 looks for maladjusted young men, I give little thought to sacrificing others in order to protect Queen and country. You know, former SAS types with easy smiles and expensive watches. Rolex?
Amiga.
Beautiful.
Bond knows that the tables have turned in the conversation, and the passes he made at her at the beginning of the scene are really just coming back to bite him at this point. He answers her question about the watch, a question which is really just her way of showing that she knows just as much about the finer things that James Bond cares about as he does, and that she has the mental fortitude to basically equal him in a verbal duel. All these things are happening under the surface. She never says, "I've got you, haha." It's all in the subtle, subtextual jabs. And she continues to take the upper hand.
Now, having just met you, I wouldn't go as far as calling you a cold-hearted bastard.
No, of course not.
But it wouldn't be a stretch to imagine. You think of women as disposable pleasures rather than meaningful pursuits.
Subtext again, no, Mr. Bond, your flirting and passes are soundly rejected, is basically what she's saying. For the first time, someone has nailed Bond's character directly to his face, and for the first time, James Bond has nothing to say.
So as charming as you are, Mr. Bond, I will be keeping my eye on our government's money and off your perfectly formed house.
You noticed.
Even accountants have imagination.
Now, of course, we know where this relationship is going, so there had to be some quip from Vesper that she does find Bond attractive in order to set up basically the rest of the film, but she says it in such a way that it's still a jab, even though Bond does get in one final poke too.
You noticed.
Bond's ego can only be ruined so far, and he keeps a shred of dignity with yet another subtextual line. Underneath the surface, he acknowledges her acknowledgement that she does find him somewhat attractive, but she still ends up with the upper hand.
How was your lamb?
Skewered. One sympathizes.
Bond acknowledges that he has lost this verbal duel, but his mild joke leaves their parting on amicable terms, keeping the door open for the relationship to ultimately develop throughout the rest of the film. The back and forth verbal sparring, smothered with subtext, is really what makes this one of the best scenes in the film. It moved the story along in 3 ways. We meet a vital character to both the plot and Bond's character development. An important plot point has been established, the $10 million buy-in with a contingency rebuy, And third, we've learned quite a bit about both characters' backgrounds without having to spend a smidge of time with nasty flashbacks or expositions. Think about how much time we would have wasted if everything we learned about Bond in this scene was done through actual scenes or throwaway lines. I was born an orphan, blah, 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 etc., etc. Instead, we learned so much about both characters and their budding relationship with each other through what's not said, what is said, and then how it's said, or in this case, how it's written. And we do this in roughly 4 minutes. When you pack that much good stuff into so little time, that's a surefire way to get your audiences to enjoy your scenes, presuming they're filmed and acted well, of course. So, for all my aspiring and indie filmmakers who are trying to write the best scripts possible, you can add subtext to your own scenes by using these tips. 1. Determine what the main point of the scene is. What are you trying to get across? In the case of this scene, we're setting up Bond's character and backstory, as well as establishing his most important relationship in the entire film. Then, ask yourself how you can come at it in a way that's not on the nose, in a way that's opposite from what your audience might expect. In this scene, it's Bond's flirting and ego about his poker experience that eventually leads to Vesper unraveling the layers of his literal character directly to his face. Okay, this one's going to sound backwards, but if you're having difficulties with the scene, try to write the scene on the nose first. This will help you figure out what the heart of the scene is actually about. Then after you've done that, add a layer on top of the subtext. Ask yourself, what else could the characters be talking about that could either dually mean what they're actually saying or lead to what they want to say? In Casino Royale, the topmost layer was money and poker, which had dual meanings, and Bond and Vesper discussing each other. Next, cut out as much dialogue as possible, especially lines of characters explicitly saying what they think or feel. Now, of course, you'll still want the meaning to be clear, but try something akin to what Vesper does. Instead of saying, "You're attractive, Mr. Bond," she says, "Even accountants have imagination." Ask yourself how you can make the lines as subtle as possible. This can often be done by coming at a line from a different angle or having a character saying something opposite of what is meant. There are a plethora of other ways to write subtext within your scenes. If you want to learn more about subtext right now, you can check out this video on subtext in, believe it or not, Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones. Yes, this Star Wars film actually has some very good subtext to it, from a certain point of view.